Yeah.
All right, welcome back to another perspective here for Steer Codes. Today we have Ed Kenneweg, a proud University of Texas alum and current Navy officer, as well as a Googler. So, Ed, a lot of different identities there. Why don't you walk us through exactly how you came to be where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, a little bit about myself. So, I grew up in a Navy family. Dad was retired Navy, served as the Master Chief E9 type, and grew up in San Diego. So, was kind of influenced from the get-go, and just doing well in high school. And then all of a sudden, my dad asked, like, "Hey, how are you going to pay for high school?" And I was like, "Good question." So, yeah, I looked all around, different opportunities, and then that's when I learned about commissioning programs and scholarships and all that through the Navy. And so I started off actually not doing ROTC right away. I was actually going to I got into the Naval Academy prep school. So it's kind of like, we call it like 13th grade. So right out of high school, I did the prep school, got to experience the Naval Academy, get ready for that. And it was just for a variety of reasons. It just long term, it just didn't really suit me. And, ultimately I wanted to have a real college experience and, obviously jealous of, people having going to parties and, like college, sports and all that there. And so did the year long prep school, and then I ended up transferring and going to UT Austin. From there, I walked on to the Navy ROTC unit. A lot of folks you can just walk on, just like sports, and earned a kind of like a partial scholarship. So I was able to get like a 3.5 year scholarship for the rest of my time at UT. So did that, graduated, commissioned 2009, went the surface warfare officer route. So, for the non-Navy folks, ships, it's kind of like, for Army and Marine Corps, you got your grunts, your infantry. I would say in the Navy, kind of the equivalent is the SWIFs, the surface warfare. Obviously we're ship based and all that. So first slash only slash last ship was a destroyer out of Norfolk, Virginia, East Coast, USS Bulkley. So was there for about 2.5 years, deployed roughly around my last year there. Strike, with the strike group, we were doing counter piracy. Captain Phillips, all that was taking place around that time. So just making sure, kind of protecting the sea lanes and all that fancy Navy stuff. After that, I transitioned to the reserve. Just like all the rookie veteran mistakes there, I thought I was marketable. I thought, hey, I'm gonna go to TAP class. They're gonna give me all the tools to succeed. Hey, that retired Master Chief that went straight from E9 to GS7, that's editing my resume, is gonna hook me up with the best job ever. And really, I got a slap of reality. And job market. This is around 2012. Definitely wasn't the best. And I was
You were
applying.
coming from a good I mean, University of Texas undergrad. You were probably trying to move back to Texas or in the area, Oklahoma
Yeah,
maybe.
I was
So
looking at, Texas, San Diego, like kind of where I was raised, and yeah, I was applying to jobs left and right. I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm a good fit. I'm gonna send my 3-page resume that kind of all these cool military acronyms, there, and to of course, no surprise, so, I got rejection, emails left and right. Hey, thanks for applying. Just thank you for your service, or you name it there, but yeah, just we're not going to move from you. And so at that point, just what am I going to do? So I learned about this. I was in the reserves at that point, about this recall program where you go back in active duty and recruit people. Just like your military recruiting. So got in, interviewed for that, and I did that for 3 years in Southern California. So doing recruiting officers, and then we were called like a division officer there. Gave me time to really figure out what I want to do, and kind of grad school and you name it there. After that, I did another kind of back-to-back recruiting tour in Denver, Colorado, and that's where I met my wife. There. Similarly, just kind of like, all right, like it kind of getting to that point where like, all right, I want to go back and be a full-time active duty guy. Kind of go for a 20, pension and all that, or don't to do reserves there. So I was kind of at that time looking a little bit at the civilian sector. I was incorporating some, kind of sit reps like lessons learned, their, resume, keeping it to like a single-ish page, there. And so was able to get a little bit of movement with job, like getting recruiters to contact me, but same thing, just 1 or 2 interviews and would just get the no email. So After that, I did a follow-on reserve recall, like an active duty gig in Washington D.C. doing a personnel policy strategy for the officers. So we call it in the Navy, we call it N1. Think what Army, you call it like S1, G1, the Marine Corps, you name it there, but essentially doing HR consulting work with the Navy. Halfway through, COVID hit, and we switched to fully remote. At that point too, I made the request like, hey, like if we're not going to come back to the office, like, well, when I, come back to Oklahoma where my wife is from, and like, who knows how this, pandemic is, is going to be? Is it going to be like a, zombie movie where, people are just
Yeah,
like running out the
like
streets, like,
Contagion. Yeah, The Walking Dead.
exactly, exactly. It's like, well, if that's going to happen, like, I'd rather have family nearby and, that support system and all that there. And so, made it work. And so my first 2 years or year and a half, two-ish, was, in person telework kind of when COVID hit. And then those last years was fully remote, on orders. And so, working remotely, telework and all that there. And then, I would do like my physical fitness test, and, drug testing with the local recruit, Navy, we have Navy recruiters, everywhere. And so,
Right,
get
right.
a call like, hey, sir, it's, petty officer such and such, you're on the list, come to recruiting station and, pee in a cup or, do your fitness test and all that there. So it all worked out. Halfway through that second half, kind of the remote tour, I was contacted by a Google recruiter. And going back, this is roughly around the time that I learned about sit reps to steer coast. I forgot how. I think it was just on Instagram. I saw a meme there, and that's when I kind of it really hit me like, wow, like I've been doing the transition stuff like wrong, like not just like for years, like for a long time. And looking back, it's like, man, I wish I had that like back in 2011 and 2012, and maybe do the MBA route instead of getting like an MS in HR. There. Although ultimately it all worked out, but definitely the tips are provided there. It's even for I know it's very MBA centric, but even for those that want to have a master's or just want to go straight into the workforce, there's still tips that you can get that can acquire and learn, from resume to networking, interview common sense, all that stuff.
Yeah, I
That'll
mean
definitely set.
you're in HR now, and you can
Yeah.
probably fact that it's not, if you're a developer, if you are a program manager, if you are a warehouse, security person, director,
Hmm.
none of those jobs require a 5-page resume. None of those
Yep.
jobs will all of those jobs will probably use the star L method, right?
Hmm.
It's all very common stuff. And MBA or not, I know, yes, we do often talk about MBAs. Um, grad degrees I think are a great place for people that are in the military to kind of like figure out what the hell's going on in the civilian world. But
Hmm.
I think you'd probably speak to the fact that every job has all of these places have very similar requirements in terms of resumes, networking, just general etiquette at work.
Hmm. Exactly, exactly. It's skills and all that there. You definitely nailed it. And I always tell people like about sit reps is just like, yeah, it's like you go there, you feel like, oh, it's like all West Point guys or talking about MBAs, and it's just like, I mean, yeah, it was created by a West Point guy. Yeah, he did. It's centered on the MBA, but if you actually dig in, there's other things he talks about there from. Going direct into tech or going, if you want to be a dentist, here's what you need to do.
Yeah,
You want to be a lawyer too. It's like there's other avenues there. Of course, like if hey, I did my 5 years, get out. I have no idea what I want to do. Of course, it's going to be centered on, hey, maybe have you considered going to grad school or going to B school, getting your MBA. Here's what you got to do that there. But oftentimes too, it's like maybe having a MBA is just wasn't in the cards or you name it there. But either way, it's like there's always going to be success. Whether you get an MBA or do other things, there's always going to be success stories, either way there. But going back to Google, yeah, Google Recruiter about like 2022, yeah, about 2021, 2022 timeframe, reached out to me on LinkedIn and just all the sit reps tips on LinkedIn profile, doing this, doing that, putting the open to work, all the recruiter features. I did all that there, and then networking with peers, other HR folks, like, hey, like what should I do with my resume? And so, what should I do with my LinkedIn? And so essentially it was all polished and ready to go. So Google Recruiter reached out to me, just like, hey, we have these HR, they call it people consultant, but like essentially like an on-site HR business partner role with these data centers around the country, and one of them happened to be nearby me in Tulsa. Um, and at first, I'm like, yeah, hopefully this isn't a scam. The guy, hopefully I respond yes, and he's not going to ask for like my social security number or credit card or you name it like that. So I hit the reply button and like, yeah, I'm interested. I see there's one nearby me, about 30, 45 minutes out. Very interested, and exchange some emails, send in my resume, and the rest is history. Did the interviews, back to back to back, 3 hours in the midst of allergy season while I have Claritin. I'm popping Claritin, I'm popping cough drops just to stay sane or just to be able to communicate. And then finally, I did a final interview with the site leader. He's not related. I'd be working with them, but he's not necessarily like an HR individual there. And happened to be that individual was a retired Navy captain, '06 type. And so, glad I never encourage, BSing interviews, but I'm really glad I did not BS and, make up, oh yeah, in the Navy, I was even though it was an '04, I did like '07 like work. And because obviously that would have been sifted out and, it wouldn't have worked out there. But ultimately got the offer and, started Google almost about the same time last year, January of 2023. At that point too, I had about roughly 14-ish years of kind of total active and reserve service. And so it was just, I think it was really unanimous, like, hey, like, it's just 6 years, get to that 20, get a reserve retirement. I have, you know, about 37, 30, actually, no, sorry, I have about 44, 4,500 points. And just like doing the math, like if I were to retire at 20 now, it'd be a decent paycheck. Not, hey, I'm going to retire at 54, but like, getting an extra like 4,500 a month, starting around age 52, because I did active duty orders, is not bad. And that's definitely going to help out with, getting the kids through school, travel expenses, you name it there. And so, kind of getting that early, getting a retirement early to kind of help boost, kind of long term goals and all that was, definitely worth it. Um, right now, in the reserve side, I'm attached to a reserve unit in the Bay Area, Commander Naval Forces Korea. So it's the naval component of U.S. Forces Korea, which I think is led by like an Army 4-star. So in particular, I'm the manpower department head, so like a field grade kind of company commander, whatever you name it there. Ensuring that the right people got the right manpower resources and all that to be ready to mobilize, and so in case something goes down,
And you
that'll.
recently took command of that unit, correct?
No, I'm actually taking command in May. So last year I found out that I got selected for '05 for commander, and then I usually, whenever in the reserves, whenever you promote, you then have to, you typically will go through we call it an apply board, but you apply for a new job because your job at the time is an '04 job, but you're about to be an '05. So it's like, all right, you need to be doing an '05 job. So in my community, the HR community, there was a couple of '05 CO jobs. It's I was competing against other, actual '05s, and but kind of I always learned is, shoot your shot and just let the board tell you, yes or no there. So, I put it, it was definitely one of my top choices. There's like another local HR job here in Tulsa that was eyeing too, but yeah, applied, and then I heard back in like December that I got the CO job of a reserve unit in San Diego. So kind of the icing on the cake there. San Diego, CO job, and so I mean it could be worse reserve jobs, out there. It could be in Fort Bragg or I don't know, whatever. Name an undesirable
Yeah.
army base or whatever there. But
So you've been going back and forth between Tulsa and the Bay Area then for the last year.
yeah. So at the time I started cross assigned, so it's like, all right, like your local admin is like you do it with the reserve center, so like your physical fitness test, your medical admin, and then typically anywhere from like once a quarter, maybe a little bit more, you'll go on travel to your actual where your actual unit is, and you do all the DTS fun stuff and everything like that. I switched to being, kind of quote unquote local with the waiver, just because there was more funding, more travel funding there, and it gave me more opportunities to, travel out there and make a difference and take on more, senior roles. And same thing for that CEO job coming up is I'll be quote unquote local, even though it's, I'm still home of record is Oklahoma, but yeah, they'll be traveling and all that too,
And the
to for
Navy in the reserve capacity, you're not having to pay for your travel or your lodging while you're there, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, correct. You get comp to depending on your billet. Yeah, you get comped up to $500 for your travel. So you'll book it personally, Southwest.com or something like that, and then you'll submit a voucher after that travel. And then for lodging, yeah, you'll work with the reserve center and request lodging, and if it's somewhere nearby a base, like for my reserve unit in the Bay Area, it's they hook us up with like a Holiday Inn, and it's actually decent. Like it's not like a Roach Coach, Motel 6. It's
You're
a
not in the
fairly decent.
barracks, like on
Yeah,
a
exactly.
cot.
Yeah, exactly. Not in a cot, not in a super rusty hotel room, or it feels like I'm in a '70s like murder film as a movie and stuff like that there. So yeah, it could be a lot worse out there.
So when you go out to your reserve unit, you said it was kind of like once every month, once every other month
Yeah,
is kind of the pattern.
exactly. To be about like once a month. It just really depends. So like for example, I traveled to LA this past month. Um, we were actually doing like a joint training with all the kind of the debts there. So yeah, I traveled this month, this past month. Last month I traveled to the Bay Area. Next month, because it's like a big joint exercise, I won't be traveling to that. And then the following month, because I'm taking command, I'm doing some turnover and all that there. So 2 months I won't be traveling, and then for my CO job, roughly 1 month, 2 out of 3 months I might be traveling, and then a third, I'll stay local, and then the XO will we kind of cover down,
And
for that there.
so obviously when you're there in uniform, shipside, you're actively, engaged. But what does it look like the rest of the month, day to day? Are you getting calls about different issues? I mean, I think a lot of people have the fear that it's going to be like going back to active duty, where if there's a reserve, the soldiers you have are obviously reserve or sailors in your case, are
Yeah,
reservists. If someone gets a DUI and they're a sailor, or there's a problem at the reserve post, how much of that are you actually dealing with day to day?
yeah, that's the thing is it's very interesting, like how the UCMJ works in terms of reserve personnel, and even just as a reservist, like really the scope of responsibility, or really not much of it, for like offsite incidents, like that. Like on the active duty side, your one of your junior sailors gets a DUI, it's like the entire investigation. They go to
Yeah.
mass to NJP and all that. There, it's really for the reserves. Hey, they we can Wednesday before drill weekend, they're dry, drinking and driving, and it's just like, okay, like let the reserve center know, and kind of really handle it from there. It gets really trickier when it's more of like, hey, like I don't know, person was driving drunk and crashed into the reserve center, on a duty status. So it's like, okay, like there's some more UCMJ because he's technically on an active duty status there. But you're right, there's a lot of like offsite incidences where it just gets very tricky, and you got to talk to the lawyers and the JAGs. I'm like, all right, what what should we do aside from informing the reserve center, hey, heads up, one of our guys, gals got in trouble, and you know good luck there. So you're right,
And
it's completely different.
and what about just, planning, resourcing, developing training plans and making sure that your operations are ready to go when you
Yeah,
do have the drill weekend? How much of your week and your time is taken up with reserve duty when you're not technically on duty?
yeah, no, that's a good question. So, really, it seems lately, kind of as a department head, that I would say maybe about 1 or 2 hours each night. Maybe I'll check emails around my lunch break for like a couple of minutes, but luckily we all have group chats. We have Signal, there, so we're able to kind of communicate more casually. But you're right. Doing reserve work, maybe I would say an average about, not on a non-drill weekend. I would say roughly around 4 to 8 hours weekly that I typically do in the evening. So, I go into my civilian job, from 8 to 4 to 5, come home, dinner, put the kids to bed, and then oftentimes it's like, all right, just like right now, go on the computer, do things, do check emails, help out with anything needed, and then kind of ideally by 9:30 or 10, it's like, all right, I'm done, and time to watch Netflix, or see if my wife's still awake and watch movies with her or stuff like that there. But I try to do a better job of balancing that. And hey, do I really need to check emails every night? Like, no. And sometimes just hey, Thursday night, like, unless there's a dire emergency, once the oldest is asleep, I'm going, I'm shutting off everything and just, chilling out and getting ready for the next day there. But that's the thing about the reserves too, is like, people get sold on like, oh, it's one weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. And it's like, in order to really move up or make a difference or to get those good, fitness reports and evaluations, you really need to do the extra work. And that's it. And talking to senior leaders, it's really, I wouldn't say it's a crisis, but for a lot of people, they're volunteering for that. They're not getting paid a lot, oftentimes those off hours. And I've been working to get those sailors paid, to get comp. Like, hey, are you spending 15 minutes to check an email? Like, no, you shouldn't get a drill point. You shouldn't get for like for like $250 for 15 minutes of work. But if you're doing, like, for some folks that are doing 20 hours, just evenings, just off time weekends, like, they need to be comped for that. And maybe it's just that HR mindset of kind of taking care of people and just retention. But I've seen that in the reserves where it's like, oh, you can just put in a non-paid and get a drill point, and it's nothing now, but down the road, those points matter, and it's like, yeah, kind of, but also like they need to get paid and comped accordingly, especially because they're doing work. You're right, they're doing training. They're pushing orders for a big exercise. We're like right now, there's a big exercise coming, and we're just going down the list of like, all right, who's delinquent on this? Who's, can we get, let's get in touch with them. They're working with the reserve center, like, hey, we need to push these orders. Like, what's holding it up there? So that's really kind of the rhythm that we got now on like a non-drill weekend.
So you talked obviously about the monetary benefits. You do get, it's prorated salary, correct? So if you're working 4 days a month, you get your salary prorated to that amount.
Yeah,
Um,
like a
and
four
you and
day
you
drill
obviously
weekend. Sorry.
yeah, and you have medical benefits. TRICARE, is it TRICARE Select?
Yeah, TRICARE Reserve. So like TRS is like the
Okay,
what they
TRICARE
call
Reserve Select. So there's definitely some benefits. I mean, now that you're at Google, that probably matters a lot less. But to someone that might be an entrepreneur, that's huge
it.
to have that kind of health insurance cushion. But obviously, you wanted to leave active duty, and I think all of us have our reasons for wanting to leave active duty. You wanted to be closer to your family. Wanted to live in Oklahoma and not have to be told
Yeah.
where in the world you're going to go.
Hmm.
But for those people that are like, man, I just didn't like active duty. I was done. I was burnt out. I don't want to go to the reserves and feel like I'm back on active duty. What are the differences that you felt between kind of that like very high paced active duty lifestyle and it's kind of all consuming, puts you in this bubble and the way that the reserves operate?
Yeah, it's a completely different change, and I'm still, even coming off active duty a year ago, I'm still making that adjustment there. And obviously, active duty people are working every day. They come into work every day, Monday through Friday, or you name it there. And so they're going to be more responsive, and it's going to be more fast paced there, as opposed to the reserves where a lot of people don't check their emails until it's drill weekend. Maybe the night before, like, oh shoot, like let's see the plan of the month. What do I need to be tomorrow at 7 or something like that there. And so, like, it can be frustrating at times too, where in terms of communication and like how do you convey, and really that leadership of like how do you convince somebody to do something on their off time? Like, hey, you need to do this GMT, you need to do your cyber awareness, there. There's that challenge, but on the other end, it's like I feel like it's the best of all worlds. Like my wife says, like, hey, you get to play Navy for a couple days, and it definitely it definitely I enjoy that and I like that, and it's like, all right, like I can do I can still make a difference, serving. I can still make a difference, in my command, sailors, and all that on a limited basis. I'm not having to leave my current civilian job. I'm not having to relocate. All the I would say the perks, but actually the negatives of the military that really draw people away. Um, I feel like the reserves, there's definitely I wouldn't say a laid back culture, but we all, it seems like there's definitely like a more relaxed, feel to it. And, a lot of times in active duty, you have that, drill sergeant or, that chief or you name it there. And it's definitely feel like the reserves, like a more relaxed, environment. That's not to say like, hey, we're just kind of putting hands in pockets and, kind of hanging around. There's definitely some, oftentimes we're trying to do, you know, 32 hours of work over the course of 16 I mean, there and rushing to get people qualified or trained in limited time there. But that's what really kept me for the reserves, and at least to getting to my 20 and kind of reevaluating after that, do I want to continue making a
Sure.
difference, or it's like hey, like I'm missing kids soccer practice or son's birthday, you name it there, because of a drill weekend or because of I'm doing my AT or my annual training, or like hey, I got recalled and I'm mobilized somewhere. I haven't really considered that, but it's definitely kind of on my mind a bit. Down the road where kids are getting older, work civilian job. Obviously I want to promote there. It's really it's like something's got to give in that work life reserve balance, and what is it going to be. So,
Yeah, and how accommodating is, and you're HR, so you can kind of give the actual official answer to, the legal answers to the people worried about, hey, you tell Google like, hey, I'm gone for 2 weeks. It's reserve duty. Um, that's not PTO, right? Google can't make you take PTO to go do reserve
mm,
duty. They also cannot, they can't be like, hey, Ed, like you were not here for 2 weeks and you know, you didn't perform like we had a down month or you didn't do something during those 2 weeks that like someone else had to do, we're gonna fire you, right?
mm,
People I think are worried about that because if you did that for anything else, like a community golf league or something, he said, hey, I'm just gonna leave. I'm not taking PTO and you can't fire me for going.
mm.
But I mean, how accommodating is Google and are your coworkers to, this like really like other part-time job?
Yeah, no, everybody's incredibly supportive, and Google definitely has good benefits. They offer 30 days of paid military leave annually, and then if you do get recalled or on a mobile, on extended orders, they'll if you're taking a pay cut being on active duty, Google will comp you that that delta or that difference to ensure that
Wow.
you're still getting, yeah. So
That's not
it's
that's not that for those listening, that is not a
yeah.
normal thing. That's pretty exceptional that Google would do that.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And it's definitely, I would say, two big perks right there. And even I've talked to others in other industries and, like, hey, it's just, we just take non-paid leave, like an FMLA or something like that, or like a leave of absence. And, maybe they offer us like 1 week of paid leave. And it's like, what? Like, that might cover like 1 or 2 months of, drills or, maybe half of your AT, if you're doing 2 weeks or something like that, there. But yeah, going back to my team and manager, everybody's very supportive. Right when I started, about a week, kind of meeting my manager, I told her like, hey, hey, I'm in the reserves. I could explain why, like, hey, I still want to make a difference. I don't want to, without having to, do a career change, relocate and all that there. Hey, I'll do my best to communicate, like, hey, I'll be gone these days. There. But just as a heads up, there might be circumstances where, I get called in, like, hey, you need to fly out tomorrow. Luckily, that's never happened yet, but just I made that commitment, like, hey, I'll do my best to communicate when I'll be gone, putting in leave, and just kind of affirming that, and working with the team too, just like, hey, can you cover down with for me on this project or this case I'm working on, and things like that there, and everybody's extremely supportive. There's no one like, oh, Ed's gone for, X days or, doing that, junk or stuff like that there. Everybody's super understanding. And luckily for my AT, that there is some flexibility as well there. So I'll talk to my team and just like, hey, like I need to do my 2 weeks. Yeah, hey, I'm just thinking maybe splitting it, a week here, a week there. Is there, anything on y'all's radar vacation wise that I should try to avoid? And, hey, one employee might be having like a wedding anniversary or like a family reunion, a week in July. And it's like, all right, I'll try to, I'll work to do my AT around there. So I definitely do my best to maintain kind of a two-way, street with, obviously the employer supporting me and then on the other way around, supporting, the employer and supporting the team. Um, and then for
Yeah.
military leave too, like, I'll be on orders next week. I'm going to a course. And, I said like, hey, I'm out, but like, I'll still be kind of peeking the emails, before I go to class, lunchtime, afternoon. So yeah, don't hesitate to, contact me. It's not like, hey, I'm going to be, in a desert, like in a bunker or something like that there. It's just, I'm at a course for this week, that I need to go to. And so, yeah, don't hesitate reaching out to me. And, I could always try to step out if you need something, from me or and all that there. So same thing, just kind of meeting that, kind of 50-50, with the team and vice versa.
Yeah. I mean, what would you tell people? Are you required? I mean, you go into a job interview if you're mentoring someone that's getting out, they want to do the reserves, they're in the reserves. Are you required to tell in an interview, "Hey, I'm doing the reserves."
No,
I'm, would
yeah.
you say that's, even a positive or a negative or just, hey, just, leave it out completely? What would be your
I
advice?
That's the thing. It's just like I strongly encourage individuals not to list it. And I know a lot of the comeback will be like, well, are you saying lying? Like lying? And that's not necessarily it, but it's just it's really another activity. And you're right. I think it just oftentimes it's unfortunately where people mention reserve, it just red flags those employers. And you're right. You might be the most qualified individual, but you go into a job interview or they look at that resume and hey, I'm a reservist. On top of that, a lot of hiring managers of what I've seen will be like, all right, no culture fit. Sorry,
Right.
there. And
They'll never
is
put it
it?
in writing.
Yep,
Right.
exactly. Is it illegal? Like, yeah, but like, can it be proved in court? Like, unless the hiring manager texted you, like, hey, we didn't hire you because you're a reservist. Like, it's going to be very hard to prove that. And a lot of
If
times
they
the
do
hiring
text
manager,
that to you, you've just become a multimillionaire, by the way.
yep,
Anyone listening, that was a case. Remember we saw that text
yeah, yeah, it
that
was like on
someone said like,
Reddit.
yeah, you're going to be gone 2 weeks in the summer, so we didn't hire you, which is effectively
Yep,
saying like for reserve duty, right?
yeah,
Um, and people were like, well, you know what? It's better than getting the job, getting a settlement from the job. So but yeah, if the person, I mean, there's hiring discrimination of all sorts. I think, my professors here at Wharton will say like, hey, don't put don't put things on your resume that are apt to be misinterpreted. Don't put,
hmm
I go to this church for fun. Don't put that you're a member of, whatever like sexual orientation you're a part of, whatever political party you're a part. Just
yep.
if there's
It's like, hey,
someone out there that could
I support the local Democratic Party or Republican
right,
Party. It's like, yeah,
right.
you're just opening up, um, very opportunities to get that rejection, for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. So anyway, that's really great.
Mhm. And then on the
Any
other end too, what I've seen for the reserves is like you have to realize like a lot of these individuals are also they have full-time jobs, and so
Yeah.
I've seen it where you might be someone who's reserving it where like hey like I'm hiring for this job. It's the same. It's like you get that networking and like hey like do you think I'd be a good fit? Here's my resume. Obviously they know you're reservist, so you can't hide that per se. But same thing, you get that insider and like hey like Wyatt's just like me in the reserves. He's awesome. He's got these skills and all that there. And like, the company, like, yeah, like Wyatt is gone, few days, maybe 1 or 2 days a month or, 2 days or 2 weeks in the summer. But like, you know, he does the job anyway. And like, it's just, people take leave left and right. People have kids and take, maternity leave. People get surgeries and take, kind of that short term or long term disability or leave of absences. It's just, it's really the reserves is just one part of that. It's just unfortunate a lot of times it gets that negative. stigma because it's like, oh, you have another job there. But it's like if you really peel it back, it's like how is it different from other leaves that people have in like you know it's just part of the role, like part of the job, where like people step up or people take leave, you name it there. It's like all right, like Ed's gone for up to 20 to 30 working days a year. Is it like, are we going to, is the ship going to sink? Like, no. I mean, we have, team members. And then same thing too. Like if a team member is sick, taking PTO or a variety of reasons there, it's like same thing. I'm ready to step up and, return the favor that they've done for me.
Mhm. Yeah. Anyway, Ed, any final thoughts you'd have either on, reserve or, working in tech or any parting words of wisdom you'd like to offer before we sign off?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really it's I don't want to. I know there's a popular Navy influencer that says kind of hashtag do both, but I would say for the reserves, I mean you're doing all three. Like you have your civilian job, you have your life, wife or spouse, kids, you name it there, taking care of the elderly, and then you have the military reserves as well. And albeit like they're all different, require different amount of, work or, time and effort. And obviously your civilian job and life are going to be kind of the two biggest pieces of that, pie there. But you still have the reserve piece where, you got to travel, you do work and, all that there. Otherwise, you're going to get kicked out or you're not going to promote or, you name it there. But it's just one balancing act, and you got to have the right support too. Like if my spouse was like, I don't support you serving, it's like, all right, great, I have no reservations to move on from that. There. And so luckily, wife is very supportive, family is very supportive, civilian job is very supportive, and so right now at least I have those elements to make it kind of support something that I really care about and what I really want to do. But just something to consider, whether it's those that are got out that want to go back to reserve serve, or even those that like reserves. It's not all prior active duty. You have folks that have skill sets that hey, I'm a cyber guy, or I'm a, I do this in tech, or I'm, name all these skills that, the reserves still want you and they'll actually bring you on board and commission you too. So, same thing as well. And I provided, support and coaching and mentorship for those like, hey, like I want to serve, but, I don't want to like relocate or, go, move my family cross country. And it's like, hey, you should check out the reserves of like, you don't have to move. You don't have to, you know, quit your job. Like you do some training, you go to schooling and all that, and you typically you'll work with your employer there. But
Yeah.
just my 2 cents there. Is make the most out of it, and definitely it's just juggling three knives, and um, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks a bunch, Ed. Last thing, how are the Longhorns going to do in the SEC first year?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go ahead and call it. We can revisit this later in the year, but I'm gonna say they're gonna win. They're gonna win the SEC. Kind of
All right.
put it on the record. There I'm very excited to see Quinn Ewers, how he's gonna he seemed like he improved, but being in the spotlight in the SEC, and not only that, but also the pressure from from Manning, from Arch Manning, like that is just ready to start and make a difference there. And I know we took some losses, some players, some good players that left for the draft. And so between recruiting and the transfer portal, how are those folks stepping in, and how are they going to kind of rebound or really kind of fill those gaps that Texas really needs, especially against Georgia, against Alabama, even with a new head coach and Nick Saban gone, like this Kalen DeBoer.
Back to the old rivalry with A&M, right?
Exactly, and then A&M as well. I think they're thinking of doing that, resuming that in Thanksgiving. So kind of what's old
Uh,
is new again, but I'm excited.
yeah. Well, yeah. Best of luck to you guys. I'm a big Steve Sarkisian fan as a BYU
Yeah,
fan myself. So
thank you,
hope the best for you guys. And thanks again, Ed.
thank you, appreciate it.